Hi, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning. Not really. It's afternoon already here in Slovenia, Ljubljana. So welcome to SQL Bits session notebooks solution, how to, basically have a better storytelling in your enterprise. Unfortunately, I'm virtual today, so due to all the COVID and everything, that's why I would like to have taken your questions immediately so that at least we can have some sort of interaction. So feel free to interrupt me, feel free to, catch up later. There's also an email if you want to get in contact with me, so please do that as well. So otherwise, feel free. Couple of words about me. I've been in data science and database for more than 20 years now. And I've come across a lot of painful points concerning better storytelling or how to make a little bit more hygienic reporting, stuff like that. So that's why this was my background motivation, why I came with the idea to give this talk. So first of all, I'm going to go with my personal take. The way how I see the notebooks as a person, as a part of the enterprise. Then I will definitely switch to go, what are basically notebooks, why they're useful. Couple of notes from the field about architecture and workflow. I've seen a lot of people are actually having a lot of issues how to basically set up the whole environment in the enterprise and especially how to persuade people to start using the notebooks. And I'll have a couple of slightly, very light demos just to give you on board. It's not really a monster and it's fairly easy to start. It's just a matter of, persuasion and how you want to start approaching and interacting your DBAs, your data scientists, your BI analysts, and essentially the whole company has different aspects of departments. So what are notebooks? Just to give you on board for those who don't know what notebooks are, essentially they are readable analysis or reports where you can not only enhance your productivity, but it's much easier to share the content that you create. It's easy to read the document, and it also includes some sort of executable code snippets, which means that you can write some documentation and then you say, okay, I'm going to execute that code, whether it's a SQL, whether it's a Python, whether it's a Julia. And then you can also do a lot of annotation, documentation, interpretation, basically everything sort of wrapped around in the same document. So the reason why this idea of the talk was born was I've seen, in my 20 years, I've seen a lot of, companies struggling to have a lot of reports, a lot of people not literally following, the rules, how to document stuff, how to write the code, stuff like that. And everything at the end, if you're, the guy who just, comes to a company and somebody just left and you've given everything, usually it's like the code is there, there's no documentation, there are a couple of reports and you have absolutely no idea where did these things come from. So essentially, notebooks are trying to address that thing that you can, with literally just the code, you can get everything done. So my personal reason for that was I've seen way too many times that there are a lot of reports that are developed but failed basically to deliver any type of conclusion. So just try to imagine a lot of Power BI reports, not that I have anything against Power BI, I love Power BI, or you have a lot of SSRS reports or any tabular reports or just Python script. And usually the problem is that, BI people, they just deliver those reports and they literally don't care about that. And this is the problem, because what you need to do is, okay, you can create a report, perfectly fine, that's it, but there's going to be somebody who will try to understand why and how did you, put all the data in, and why did you put that measure and that slicer and stuff like that. So essentially, what notebooks are trying to do is just to get a little bit more context, just give me a little bit more documentation, just a little bit more interpretation. So, try to consolidate what you've been going through that code and put some words in, at least, for the next person who's going to go through that code or through that notebook, through that report, that he or she will understand why that was there on the first place. I've also seen, as I said, a lot of code left undocumented. Not to talk about revision or just, classes laying around and stuff like that. So essentially, Notebook will also help you. There's this code, it's called cell. You have cell blocks, and you try to, minimize the number of cells, but otherwise, content-wise, you want to have cells sort of like, like a unit that gives you one. It might be a definition, it might be a method, it might be a class, or it might be just a graph. So you try to essentially break down your code, which can be long, whether it's a SQL, whether it's a Python, and you essentially create these cell blocks. And in between those cell blocks, of course, what do you want to do? You want to put some documenting. So why am I doing this now? So, and all the documentation can be done then essentially with markdowns, and beautifully markdowns. Why? Because you can do some annotations, you can do some bigger, smaller fonts, some tables and stuff like that. The next thing was, which was heavily neglected, and I'm super happy that I've seen a lot of people talk about Purview and data governance and data mesh on SQL Bits 2022 also. So I'm very fond of that and very happy. It's a lot of the time, when your analysts and machine learning guy and data scientists and DBAs create code, they forgot to literally do anything. Once it's used, it's forgotten. And that's also the problem, because a lot of companies have seen that it's much cheaper to Google it than, to reinvent the wheel. Instead of just try to have things visible on one place, just give it, a couple of sentences, and then don't reinvent the wheel. Don't Google it, have some courtesy and just write all those steps down, how you managed to get there, how you created that table, why you inserted that package, why you created that class. Just give it a go, just put, some sense of that, and all the data governance, or let's say metadata management, will eventually be much easier. I've also seen a lot of in a lot of companies that people write and then tend to stick to that. So instead of just writing and passing it on to somebody else, right? Either for the code revision or just move on to another project, out of grace period, you put the project to somebody else. No, they tend to stick to everything, which means that the longer they stick to it, the less likely is for them that they will do anything about documentation. This is one thing. And the second thing is they won't share it. And this is the problem in a bigger enterprise culture. Then also the guy who comes after you will be, why? Because he will have to maintain that. And this is also the problem. So, notebooks will essentially say, okay, just push it to Git. Just give it a go, make it visible. And then somebody will sort of go and do code review and say, oh, you forgot to do some documentation, or there is a wiki site. Just put some keywords and some stuff in, which will essentially make everybody's lives easier. So again, these are, a couple of those personal takes that I've seen people constantly neglecting. As I said a couple of times, notebooks are essentially very good also for CI/CD or data ops, whatever you want to call it, because it is just a bunch of code. So it's much easier to maintain it, to version it, and stuff like that. So and don't be afraid to share them, and have different departments go through your documents or sorry your notebooks. Why? Because a technical guy will see some technical issues, a content person will see some content issues, and if you can merge those two together, that's the win-win combination. And also what also notebooks can give you is tackling environments. So since in the past couple of years we've seen a huge rise in Python and R community and interest and everything, all the codes and everything. I've also seen a lot of people are forgetting about environments. Just put some YAML file and say, okay, I've used that version of that package and etc. etc. Why? Simply because if somebody wants to rerun that and get the same results as you did, they will have some troubles and stuff like that. So keeping up kernels is then again much easier with notebooks. Why? Because when you start writing a notebook, you can say install that, pip install if you're using Python, or just install package if you're using R or whatever, Scala, and just go with that. And it's fairly simple. Again, as I said on the previous slide, you can also push that everything through infrastructure as code, no problem at all. As long as there is beautifully documented, at least some documentation, of course, things will get much cleaner, much more visible, much more sorted, and of course, people who will be responsible to get the content next will definitely have much easier job. So Jupyter Notebooks, as I said, it's abbreviation from Julia, Python, and R. The logo kind of resembles the Jupyter planet. So those are literally three most modern or frequently used languages, especially in data analysis world and stuff like that. So it's Julia, Python, and R. Python essentially is becoming more and more popular. I've seen a lot of people are also taking Julia. So, this is just to give you a sense where the word is coming from. So again, I've already said that, what they are and why they are popular. Popular especially because they support multi-languages, multi-platform, so you can run it on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, whatever. It's an open source technology. It's fairly easy to share, or extremely easy to share. You can put output as a report. So I'll have a couple of slides at the end trying to explain you that companies, at least in Slovenia, what I've seen, were, they were having a lot of notebooks. So they prepared all the analysis in notebooks, especially financial reports. And then they had like a couple of those packages. It was in R. You have a couple of libraries in R, and they've just with a couple of clicks and a couple of code, install that and do that. They had all the financial reports ready. So just, keep that in mind, instead of what we usually do would go write some Python, do some SQL, copy paste, put some print screens, and then you forget at the end, oh no, I forgot to include that department, or there was some error, and you have to redo everything again and again. With notebooks, it's just, you correct one number and just run, and the code will create the end report over and over again. Again, as I said, well-known user interface. It is embedded in several different tools, so it's super easy to either use it with, really whatever you want. So definitely, these are a couple of reasons why they are popular. I will be addressing roles like business analyst, data engineer, data scientist, quantitative analyst, algorithm engineer, machine learning scientist. These are all the roles, and especially if you are from SQL world, I will definitely put on also DBA. So because notebooks can fuel experimentation and innovation, can be tailored for different roles. So that's why you can address different roles. And of course, they can scale to support different ecosystem or services, languages, policies. So they are sort of like a, white piece of paper where you can, put on whatever you want to put on. So try to imagine a corporation, a enterprise organization where you would have, that flow. And, if we start from the left-hand side with business analysts, you can see, I've just given a couple of tools. Just, don't stick only to that tools, but just to give you an idea, and all the languages. So, a business analyst essentially can use PyCharm, RStudio, ADS with these languages. All those languages stick with notebooks. Then you have analytical engineer, which can use Visual Studio Code, which can use Power BI, which can use Tableau, and of course, languages like Python, Spark, Presto. Almost everything can also be there, except, Power BI. But then again, if you're using any type of SQL or Python or R, you can sort of pre-create and then also push it to Power BI. And then you have data engineers, which use like Spark, Python, SQL. Everything basically goes also in notebooks. And then at the end, you have data scientists. Again, all the languages and tools are pretty much supported. If I go here also with DBAs, so, just try to imagine what DBA does. So every morning, either runs some PowerShell code, try to figure out what's going on, or SQL code. Of course, you can also put that in. It shouldn't be a problem at all. So what you need to do is just, have a couple of those queries run, just put it in the notebook, have some documentation, and then every morning when you run, you can either schedule to be run for you. So in this case, you would use Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Studio, and you would run in Azure Data Studio a job that would essentially run a notebook, and once you're there, you get the results back. Or you can go even further. You can create a report out of that. So, or just grab a couple of queries that you need, and you essentially just bring them on. Of course, as I said, it's super open source. You can also add some widgets, for some dynamic graphs and stuff like that. So it's really brilliant. In terms of diversity, again, sticking with those roles, we see that, for instance, business analyst is doing a lot of data exploration. So, viewing data, running queries, doing some type of profiling, explanatory analysis, visualizations. All those things can be covered in notebooks. Then you have analytical engineer who would do some repetitive tasks like data cleaning, like standardizing, transforming, denormalizing, and stuff like that. Everything can be, again, pushed into the notebook just with a little bit of documentation, and you can reuse those notebooks again and again. And I'm not saying that you cannot use your standard Python code or standard SQL code. Of course you can. But from what I've seen was that, if you open Management Studio and SQL Server and start writing queries, not a lot of people are, prone to do all the, necessary documentation and stuff like that. With notebooks, you can write a lot of documentation. It's fairly easy. And you can also put some pictures in and like notes and say, watch here, do that. It's super, much more beautiful and super easy. And essentially, you can also always export it to HTML, to PDF, to ebook, anything that you can find the results interesting and just push it forward to either the next department or management or whoever. And then you have data engineers who will do data validation. Again, reoccurring tasks every day or for every project. And essentially, these are also suitable tasks for notebooks. And then you have data scientists where they will do, they will take what the previous departments have created and put everything either in production or just trying to deploy the code. So, and again, this is, again, something very close to notebook concept. If you go to Azure machine learning services, you will see you have a complete Jupyter lab there. And you can just push the notebooks, the pickled file, all the supporting documentation, all the Python R code, Julia code. You can push that directly to your DevOps. You can branch it. You can, literally anything. And you can go even a step further. And what you can also do is you can either, schedule a Kubernetes that will, just run on a certain time, run that notebook, sort of provision a cluster and run that notebook and push the results back. So, a lot of stuff can be done using notebooks.
Thomas, can I just jump in there? It's Chris. I've had a question from the audience here. Do notebooks support Mermaid?
Mermaid, that I don't know. What is Mermaid?
I don't know either.
One
moment, Thomas. The guy's the other side of the room.
Okay.
It's a way of doing graphs in markup. If that helps.
Just, I'm Googling it as we are speaking, so don't. If it's a markup language, then I would say yes. But I definitely I'm just gonna. This is what I came up. I guess this is the thing that you were talking about. I've never used that, so I'm not gonna say yes or no. But if it's a markup language, then it should be fairly easy to use in a notebook.
Awesome. Possibly something to follow up after the session.
Perfect.
Thanks so much. I'll let you get on.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So now we come to that part where, people would start asking, so how would you, go about, how would you start with that? So essentially, you have to think about a couple of things. So first of all, you need either some sort of a compute environment and you need some store environment. So those are always, those two essential things that you would either have to sort of just, have architecture guy and people from different department, sort of set up. And then you would have some local clients where, people would either start writing and doing that. So this is, for example, an example where you would use Interact Papermill. And what would you have is you would have on that side, you would have, different departments, different people. And those people will either, run, write, whatever, and everything can be pushed either to a Docker or to a server, whatever. Once they are finished, they can start parameterizing those notebooks. They can, schedule those notebooks. Again, as at the bottom, you can see there is a CI/CD or a GitHub. So you would need to have some type of versioning and some type of code revision, and what is in the previous state, what was confirmed and stuff like that. So just keep in mind that all those processes you need to essentially just sort of define in your enterprise and say, okay, we're going to do like that. Once you have that, you can, again, as I said, you can have jobs execution. Again, Papermill is super great for that. There are also other tools that can basically help you. Once you push the notebook to your storage, you can have there a couple of scripts that would essentially just run a notebook and then do something with it, with the result, either to output it as a report or a notebook. And then you would also have, as written here, notebook convert and rise and a couple of other Python packages or packages or just scripts that will basically create you a beautiful output just the way you go. So this is something that is, if you ask me, relatively cheap to create. Is just the thing that you will need to do mostly is talk with people, organize, write down some rules how you want to do that. You can also push that, for instance, to DevOps. No, so Azure DevOps, no worries at all. So this is also something, you know, that can be done fairly easy and simple. Then you're going to say, okay, what about machine learning people? So try to imagine again, you would have people like business analysts, data engineer, or DBAs. They will use their own local visual code or whatever user interface they will have. And then you would have data scientists or machine learning engineers. They would either use also their own local version of notebooks, or they can go directly to, for instance, to Azure, use either Databricks or Azure Machine Learning. Essentially, what you want them to do is to have those notebooks being pushed into a version control system where they will have their compute and store. And that's it. Essentially, in Azure Machine Learning Studio, you would also have some type of orchestration available, also scheduling. So those things are basically taken care of. And there is also, those who are using Azure Machine Learning Studio, there is also this added in visual code in this middle picture at the bottom here. This was introduced not that long ago, where you can essentially open a Jupyter lab in Azure, just add it in Visual Code. It's still in preview mode, I guess. And it will just, bam, get all the content that basically you need to run that code onto your client machine. So you don't need actually Jupyter Notebook. You can actually write it in Visual Code Studio. And it's beautifully created. So, if you're having questions, what about that department? What about that department? I'm just giving you a lot of, essentially, a couple of solutions how to go about that. Then you would have Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Studio and PowerShell, where you can also standardize notebooks, just with a couple of different services in Azure. This was taken from Microsoft, so they also have this architecture available for you to basically just start consuming if you want. So essentially, again, you would have some DBAs on two sides, which both would use Azure Data Studio, and then they will push the data or the notebooks into some type of planner, and then this planner will then just do all the automation for them. So again, taken from storage, doing something with different notebooks, pushing everything into GitHub. Again, everything can be executable through user interface or from command line, literally, flawlessly with no problem at all. Again, since we're talking about PowerShell, PowerShell is super awesome, and everything can be run immediately. Then you have Databricks. For those who are using Databricks, Databricks is super fine, super awesome, because it's a sort of like a platform encapsulated, environment where you get everything. So you just have people writing notebooks, and that's it. You don't really care, you don't need really, as a business analyst or as a machine learning guy, you don't really have to worry about, where this code is running, how long will my cluster be running and stuff like that. You just, open your notebook and start writing. Everything can also be integrated with version control. This was something introduced last year in Databricks, that you can now sort of use repositories with GitHub, Bitbucket, stuff like that. So you can, essentially have all those stuff written there, and everything can be, up and running. You can create branches, you can do stuff like that. So, everything is for you there. You can then schedule, you can do pipelines, you can do orchestration. Everything is created for you in Azure Databricks. And then you have also, for instance, Jupyter Hub or Jupyter Lab. So Jupyter Hub is something that you can, if you go to this website, GitHub Trallard. There is actually the littlest Jupyter hub button that makes you just click on it, and essentially there is a Terraform script in the back that will essentially create the whole Ubuntu virtual machine with all the access and storage and virtual private network and keys and stuff like that. So you don't really have to worry about that in particular, especially if you're not keen on doing that. What I'm trying to say is it's fairly easy to install. The problem is going to be, persuading people, just go there, push that, and that's it, And you have essentially all the storage already created for you. You create a storage name and storage will be, grain and stuff like that. And then you have the same people running, whether it's in local instances or web instances of Jupyter Notebook or Visual Code, you can then just grab everything and push everything together. As I said, this is the way to go. Just to give you an overview, how to also be aware and where to start, just, organize the idea, have task management system created, and then you have data sources, think about where all the data is residing, have some metadata exploration, then start creating all the tooling for analysis and stuff like that. And then you can start doing the presentation, the books with the RISE, with NB convert and stuff like that to sort of synthesize, all the knowledge that you pushed out of the Jupyter and push it into the notebook. And then, go to repo and then deploy it. In this case, it can also be Jenkins, Travis. It can be, a couple of different flavors. Really depends on where you want to go. Essentially, Jupyter can interact with those as well. So it can also be GitHub Actions if you decide to do that. I've mentioned Papermill. The Papermill is great for scheduling and executing notebooks. Again, this can be run locally. So this was set up on my machine. Essentially, just import a couple of packages and you're ready to go. You can then execute notebooks through sort of like a cron, quote unquote, job. You can schedule it. And also, my personal favorite is you can capture error logs much better. Why? Because sometimes, for those who've been using notebooks, those errors can be tedious. Either you don't want to see them or you don't really get the right information. Papermill will help you here as well. And then there's also versions of creating business reports and books. Really depends on the flavor of the language you want to go with, whether it's say Rust, Go, or Python, doesn't really matter. Just keep in mind the idea and the concept that you can, and I repeat, you can take notebooks and create beautiful reports. I mean, it's not going to be that beautiful as, for instance, if you put anything to a designer team, of course not. It still has, some flaws, and HTML is not really that good. But essentially, everything can be automated. If you have your CGP or your company logo, you want to have it there and stuff like that. You can do that just like that, and then you have just click of a button, and everything will be created. There are just a couple of frameworks or packages that can help you do that. So it can be GitHub, GitHub Pages, DockerWiki, Hugo, Bookdown, many more. Just to throw you a couple of ideas. And they also support snippets, shortcuts. They can have some rich embedded stuff. As I said, Mermaid, I don't know, but why don't just give it a try? And I'm pretty much sure that you can also insert that. At the end, remember, you can export it to PDF, to HTML, to if you're using Jenkins, you can push everything to GitHub, and just bam, you have a website. So this is something that essentially have a couple of guys sort of prepare you all the environment so that at the end, when you are done with your Python analysis, you can just bam, have all the reports as a website. And this is something that is super awesome and beautiful. And this is an example, how you can create from a couple of notebooks, you can create like a PDF or EPUB. So again, installing notebook merge and notebook convert to Python packages that are super easy to go about. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch to my computer, and we'll go through a couple of those ideas just to give you, what you can do with that. At the end, as I said at the beginning, I am super fond of notebooks. I'll give you also some issues that I have. Of course, not everything is, super nice and fancy. I just want to take all those purple glasses off and tell you there are also some caveats with notebooks. I'm just going to blaze through them. So first of all, order of execution of cells and hidden states. This is I hate it, really. What does it mean? For those who are running notebooks, you can see that these are the cells, and every cell that you run, it's sort of like enumerated. So you can go, but this enumeration, it's basically up to you. You can come to 10 and then go back and down and up and down and up and down. The problem is that sometimes you would have some intermediate states of some variables or some modules or some results that might not really be what you think you're having, and it might give you some type of skew result. So this is something that is super bad. And also the hidden states, which means that you can have some variable predefined that you forget about, and then you run it and you get some wrong results. Again, this is something that I don't really like. For that part, I don't really like, the way how you flow through the code. It might be difficult for the beginners because, the cells are basically broken. The code is basically broken down into cells, but then again, it's up to you to talk to them. Just get them on board, talk to them, show them it's not really a monster. So, they will, be fine with it. Notebooks can also support bad habits, and you will see on my machine a lot of notebooks are titled Untitled 1, Untitled 2. Why? Because by default, and still don't know why, Jupyter Notebook will name all the notebooks untitled, and they will be saved. So there will be no pop-up window saying, do you want to save this or rename that? So essentially, you will come up with a lot of those notebooks named Untitled, whatever there is inside of them. So it can be something like this, connecting database from your client PC, but essentially it will be named Untitled. So, not everything is super clear, so it's up to you to have, those hands-on. Also hiding the code, running notebooks from another notebook. This is, again, super fine if you know what you're doing. But in this case, I was running on the right-hand side a notebook which I didn't know what was inside and where did this definition or method came from. So again, this is something, especially if a notebook is long, you are sort of instancing functions, modules, classes, stuff like that, that you cannot really know where they are coming from. And this is also annoyance, I'm going to say. It can also be a caveat. And also modularity of models. The problem is all the modules or the classes needs to be initialized in the environment where you're running the notebook from. What does this literally mean is sometimes your code will break. Just to give you an example, I have a demo on that actually. You are saying from this module import that function, and it will run. But then you move your notebook into different folder, and this code won't work. Why? Because you've, for instance, moved that notebook into the module of that, into the module where you're running that function, and it will break. So this modularity is not really my thing. The thing is, if you run, your code in Jupyter Notebook, you will not have code completion, IntelliSense, and those wiggly lines saying, okay, maybe there's something wrong with your code. So this is also something which, of course, there are some packages that will prevent or help you with that, but just bare bone Jupyter Lab or Notebook won't have that. So, what I usually do is I also write the code in IntelliSense environment, so it will help me. Okay, so if this method has, or this class has that method, or that method has these functions or these parameters, it makes the flow much faster. Okay, so now I'm gonna jump into my environment. And first of all, I'll just give you an idea. When I was saying supporting bad habits, this is the bad habit, untitled 1, 2, 3, 4. That's super bad. Okay, so going from the caveats. So this is, for instance, my notebook, and I'm just going to run it here, so you'll see. Okay, so first of all, this notebook is on this path, and what I'm going to do now is I have a module here which I basically created, and in this module there is this function, and this function has this file, and this file there are a couple of methods or classes, I don't really remember, which like helper, for instance. So first of all, I am in this path, and I will be calling this module and this function. And in this case, this will definitely work. So super fine. If I go now in this module, so I'll go into this module and I run the same code. So from that module, import that function, and I run it, I get the error. So what is the problem? The problem is that this Python notebook is on this position, in this path, and this one is in the module itself. So if I give you an idea how this looks is, so the module is the first one. And if I go to my module function, here is the sample notebook, which is this one. And I'm calling essentially just some Python script. So just to give you an idea. So it's just, simple, small case, uppercase, and that's it. So this is the problem that, sometimes your code will break just for that. So as I said, I was running that, bam, I get the error. But in this case, if I run and say, okay, import just this function, this function will work just fine. So I can put small case, or I can put upper case, I guess, should be. Yeah, okay. So this is something sort of like a caveat for that. I was talking about compiling notebooks. So for instance, I have 2 chapters here. So one chapter is, just some simple random pandas, and then the second one is just empty, but I can also import something like import pandas and run, doesn't really matter. So what I did was, so I installed merge and put those 2 into a ebook. I essentially called it like that, notebook. So essentially, with one script, I've basically concatenated or merged 2 chapters, so, or 2 notebooks. The next step would be, of course, to convert that and to give it like much more beautiful, let's say, outlook. Then you have to, download a couple of functions or scripts that will create also a beautiful either ebook or PDF, doesn't really matter. So this is something that just be aware that this is super easy to create. Again, if you're using...
Sorry, it's Chris, just to jump in, just to give you a 5-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. Just to give you an idea that this is something that you can either run in Python or you can run in R. So it doesn't really matter. Just go with it. You know, it's super easy. Then the next thing is I was talking about parameters. So again, you can put parameter, predefined parameter or parameter as it is into the notebook. So in this case, what I did was I installed a parameter. So I installed Papermill and put a parameter, and then I can use this parameter any given time I want. So in this case, I'm using those parameters which I can change. And oops, okay, something is wrong, like this, and you know the values will definitely change. But then I can go even further and I can inspect those. I can even put some type of parameterized names. So if I say report 1, report 2, or per year or per month, this will also work, and it will basically create an output, as you can see here. So I was literally running a parameterized notebook with these two parameters, so SQL bits and some height, and the result was, I think it was in this one. No, there was another notebook actually created out with output that had those two parameters sort of like merge whatever the code was doing. So this is again something that you can create easily. If you're using Databricks, you can connect to Databricks from your local machine. Again, beautiful from this, or you can go into Visual Code. A couple of those caveats I was talking, you know, you can run this code and then run that code and then run that code. And sometimes, you know, the results will get skewed or differently back. I was also talking about, you know, capturing different notebooks. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm running some other notebook, which essentially is great. But if you don't know what you are doing or where this function is coming from, then this might be a problem. So in this case, it's calling this notebook and that's it. I can also, as I said, you know, if you're a data scientist, you can also run experiments from your machine. So in this case, I need to just install a couple of packages, Python packages, and then this is my subscription, my environment, my everything. You can go ahead, take photos. You still need to, you know, log in. I can run that, and of course, because I have in my Azure, I have this environment created. It will essentially connect to that environment, as you can see here, and it showed, for instance, a data set that I have in my machine learning services in Azure. So I can continue on with this framework, with this Python SDK, and do everything locally or in Visual Code, or I can push everything into the cloud. Again, if you're going to Azure, there are, as I said, Azure Machine Learning Studio, and you have essentially all the Jupyter lab encapsulated in here. So this is beautiful, not only for writing, for experimenting, but also for sharing and keeping everything neatly documented. The last thing I want to show you is Databricks. Databricks has this use of different languages. So if you can see, first of all, I'm using SQL and it's doing totally fine. Then I'm using Python with this, and I can run Python code, or then I can do R code, sorry. And then I can do some file store, you know, then I can do also Scala. So this is something that where you can interactively change the languages itself. And the last thing, as I said, you know, you can tiny Jupyter Lab, you know, you can install it with that click of a button, or you can also install it through, you know, the way you want it to do. I also want to mention Azure Data Studio. Azure Data Studio also supports, this cannot be, I cannot make it any bigger. You can also Azure Data Studio also supports switching between languages, not only switching between kernels, but also the languages. So if you decide to install machine learning add-on in Azure Data Studio, you can essentially switch between R and Python and SQL language just like that. This is just one thing that to keep in mind, have this pre-installed, so machine learning add-on in Azure Data Studio, and you are definitely good to go. Okay, so my last slide, I guess. Bam. Slides are. Okay. Okay. Oh, something went wrong. Perfect. Just to give you a fun fact. Okay, just leave it like this. The fun fact, there is Jupyter conference every year. Netflix, for instance, has adapted notebooks years ago. As I said, in Slovenia, there are at least 2 banks that I know that are, actively using notebooks to generate reports. And of course, there are many other companies that are doing that as well. Thanks. We are running out of time. Feel free to get in contact if you have any questions. And of course, we want your feedback. So do that as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Thomas. Round of applause for Thomas, please.
Thank you.
Excellent. As mentioned there, the feedback is very important. I think there is a prize per day if this is your first day here. So if you do fill in the feedback, you will be entered into that draw. And I think for every 10 feedbacks we get, there is a tree planted. So benefit for everybody. But thank you very much, Thomas. It was great seeing you again. And I'll try my best to get over to Slovenia in December and make sure we have those pints.
Thanks, everybody. Talk about dogs. Have a beautiful day. Yeah, and enjoy your lunch. I guess it's lunchtime. So
it is. Yes. Thank you very much, Thomas. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.